We should have had a strongman, Randall Flagg, who is appealing to everyday people with power, with structure, with order, and with a sort of commitment to like look the other way at, the slavery, or look the other way at the brutality, look the other way at the crucifixions, because it's all in service to this greater security and, strength and everything else that I am giving you. Because that is something we see people still find intoxicating. And they could have actually said something really interesting about this time we live in, right? You could have had a show about a plague that deals with really specific, interesting political situations in this country right now. And it could have had everybody talking, right, about how Randall Flagg is a believable dictator and that regular people, would find this appealing. The idea that is sitting there in their laps, waiting to be made, and a time in which it would have been perfect. And it would have been something that I think people would have found really interesting. And, maybe there would have been a backlash from some of the worst people on the internet, but, that can be good, right? It's people talking about your show. And instead it felt like, well, that sounds maybe touchy, or that sounds not as flashy and sexy as I want it to be. So instead I'm just going to go this like 12-year-old like fantasy about what I thought this would look like. Like, this is the silliest version of Las Vegas that I can imagine. And instead they lean heavily into that.
Welcome to episode 171 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm James.
And I'm Luke.
And this week we discuss Josh Boone's 2020 series, The Stand. Things took a turn in the second half of the show. You alluded to a couple of things that you'd seen online, but things were different in the second half, and I don't know if it was for the better.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly. It's not to say it was all bad. There is some good stuff which we will touch on. I think we've established in this podcast that we are going to try and come at things optimistically. We're going to give people the benefit of the doubt whenever possible. And maybe sometimes, honestly, we're going to give benefit of the doubt to people that we shouldn't. But we tend to err on that side, right? Like, we want to assume people have good intentions and that they're not trying to be, offensive or whatever it is.
And we might be seen as naive because of that. And I'm okay with that. I'm willing to accept that. Because Absolutely. Like, optimism is, I think, especially in art, is to be applauded, I would say. Like, you want to like everything. There's no reason to go in pessimistic about anything.
Right. And I'm going to continue to do that because I think it makes for a more enjoyable experience for me. I think that I set myself up to enjoy things more than if I go into it looking like with the knives already out, looking to, to dissect something in sort of a vicious way. So I think it's a healthy mindset, but this show, especially in these last few episodes, it really challenged that for me. And I felt like today I have to say that Josh Boone and everybody who signed off on this version of Trash Can Man in particular that opens episode 6 should be ashamed of themselves, because it is incredibly offensive. He is doing this bizarre caricature, Ezra Miller, who should also be ashamed of himself. And sure, people can divert blame and say that somebody else was actually the one who was responsible for these decisions, but I assume that everybody who is high enough in this show played a role in this, and at least okayed it, because it came out, right? And it's disgusting, honestly. It's like, I can't imagine what I would feel like if I had somebody in my life who suffered from something like that, or maybe even suffered from isn't even the right term, but like who lived with a disability. And to see that turned into this bizarre caricature, this like semi-naked man who is like squealing and squawking like an animal. He's got his arm cocked to the side. He's got his jaw protruding, and it's just gross. And it really made it difficult to even engage with the show after I saw it, because it upset me so much. And I think you would probably back me up in saying I don't typically like to be this sort of forceful in my condemnation, because I try and give people the benefit of the doubt, but I just felt like I had to in this situation.
Yeah, it was rough. I mean, it was uncomfortable again. And like you said, people who were in charge okayed this. And honestly, like something that I was thinking about is like Stephen King got on board to write part of the end of this season. Sure. Like, so like clearly this was somewhat in line with the characters he was writing or something. And he felt okay enough to be involved in it.
Well, we don't know what his level of control is. Again, maybe I'm giving him too much a benefit of the doubt, but typically the writer isn't going to be in the final edit room to decide whether or not something's going to go out in a certain way. That's just not control they give you. Even someone like Stephen King, I can't imagine.
And realistically, like he wrote it before and got on board before the performance was done. But I don't know. This is like a big sticking point, but there are a couple other things that went on throughout the second half of this. Sure. Where it just felt like complete misfires to me. Like there were moments where I was like, why are we concentrating on certain characters and certain things that really, I felt like there was a decision made to focus on things that weren't focused on in the book for the sake of focusing on them, because there was like sort of less known about them for the book readers and things like that. But then like you're losing the essence of the story when you go away. Some of these main characters that we're supposed to spend time with, that sort of have the themes of the story woven into their character arcs, are done a disservice. And then we go along with some of these other characters. Like we were with Lloyd way too much, for example. And like, I don't know, it started to become baffling for me. And honestly, by the end of the show, this is not the type of person I am when I watch this kind of stuff, but I couldn't hold back my scoffs nearing the end, as things started to come to a conclusion. And the thing that's the most upsetting to me about this show is that there was a lot of promise in it, and there are moments of great TV that I think, I don't know, if they were able to mine those diamonds and make a show full of that, there's something good here. Yeah. And that's upsetting because it is a fun, epic tale.
Yeah, there's a good story here. We enjoyed the book. We talked about it, at length, and we can't enjoy the book as much as we did and not think there's a great adaptation to be had. I know a lot of people enjoy the 90s adaptation, and I'm looking forward to delving into that in a bonus episode probably, because I am curious to see another take on this. But I always viewed this as a book that was going to be a very difficult thing to bring to screen, yet the way to go would be to always focus on characters, being attached to characters, having the audience form relationships with all the characters. And then through that, some of the more fantastical, over-the-top moments will still resonate because it's happening to people that we deeply care about. Whenever they had a chance to compress and condense, they did it to the characters. They were like, yeah, we'll just get rid of that whole part that's very important to their development. We'll get rid of this whole backstory. Trash Can Man won't have any backstory. He'll just appear on screen out of fucking nowhere. We'll have no explanation for what this man is. He seems like he's not even a person.
Well, most of these characters and events that go on, imagine not reading the book and coming to this show.
Most people who watch an adaptation will not have read the book. Yeah. Like, that is just always the case. So if you have not read this book and you have no other understanding of it, you are not provided with any explanation for what this guy is or how he got to be the way he is or anything. And like, I'm not trying to say that Stephen King's version of Trash Can Man is perfect in any way, but that version of the character felt a lot more like he had certain sort of triggers and certain paranoias and certain sort of schizophrenic things that he would go through. And it was all deeply tied to his past and his backstory, right? And he even goes through an arc of being terrified of Randall Flagg and then being brought in, and then like eventually he sort of falls back on his old ways, and then he tries to atone by bringing the bomb. All of that is streamlined, compressed, or completely omitted, and we're just left with what appears to be a creature instead of a person. And it's a particularly glaring example of what was going on everywhere else in the show too. There was just so much where it felt like they were underserving these characters, to where by the end there were a few characters that I felt attached to and I was cheering for, but it just didn't. The level of depth that you get in the book is just not there, and in it seemed like they were favoring bizarre things instead when they could have been focusing on the characters more.
Yeah, agreed. I've seen some stuff online at this point, having finished the show. I was like, I want to see how people feel about it. And I've seen a lot of people saying that a lot of the characters were miscast. And I want to push back against that a little bit, because I feel like for the most part, the cast wasn't the problem. It was the characters and the material that they were given to like work with. Because for the most part, I felt like you can even, like, I know people complain about James Marsden and Stu Redman, and I'm like, he does a serviceable job as like an everyman. Like, he wasn't as like engaging as books do, but like I thought most of the performances were pretty spot on. And honestly, to that point, most of the production value that's in this show is like the editing is there, the cinematography is there. I think the show looks great, and maybe with a better vision for the overall show, this is a home run.
Yeah, it looks great. The production value is there. There's care all over the show. There's people who care about what they're doing, what they're making. To talk about your cast point, at least of the main characters, I definitely disagree with that. I think everybody was solid to good. Nobody really stands out as great, except for perhaps Harold, although he still struggles at times with how the character was written and some of the disservices they do to him. But I think the guy who played Harold, he did a great job.
I agree. I thought he was a standout for sure.
Yeah. I guess my one point where I would agree is Nick, who is not really much of a character in these final episodes because he does die very early. But yeah, I mean, we talked about it a lot in our last TV episode on episodes 1 through 5. We both are not a big fan of that, and yeah, I would agree that is a miscast moment, because while I'm not saying the actor's bad, he just doesn't bring what was necessary, in my opinion, for Nick to really work as a character. And then he was written incredibly poorly.
Right. And we talked about in our first show episode how much more important it could have been to have someone who was actually deaf and mute to play a character like this.
Sure.
But for me, Nick, in terms of the writing of the show, is one of the biggest slaps in the face to the book readers and people who understood, because that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about people who are fundamental to the story and what like the overall themes are. The show, like, you almost can't really pull I mean, I guess I shouldn't say that, because some of the themes are literally told to you, but the things that are supposed to be more subtle, the things that you're supposed to be able to pull out of the characters and things going on, Nick was one of those moments where I was like, wow, like when Nick died, I was like, I felt nothing. Like, I was like, this isn't
I was
Nick.
numb. Yeah. And I felt that way about a lot of what happened. And people might say, well, you already read the book, so you knew it was coming. But like, that is not the case in so many other adaptations we've watched. And the job of an adaptation is to make you feel for people, and you know, to use music, to use, you know, whatever you can to make sure the emotion is there. And so often it felt like it was lacking.
Yeah, you could argue the other side of that. The fact that we knew that it was coming, they could play on that and really like play up the drama and play up the heartache and build up the character to where it is devastating again. That
does remind me, though, there was a moment where he's looking at a piece of art that I believe he made. It's like, looks like it's him in a boat right before he goes out and opens up the piano. And I do remember that being affecting because I felt like I felt a sadness for the character because I knew it was coming.
Because of the book, though.
Right.
Mostly.
But maybe that was what you were saying, like them kind of playing a little bit with like, well, the people who have read the book are going to know what's about to happen. So,
which isn't really fair to show watchers, though. Like,
well, it was still a touching moment. So I watched this whole show with my wife, who has not read the book and has not seen the show. She knew nothing about it, like the older version of the show. So I did get that perspective throughout. We would talk about it a lot, and I remember her pointing out how it was really sad how he was looking at that. So like it did still, like that part still worked for her, I think.
Well, I'm glad to hear that it still came through for you know, even if you didn't know.
Yeah, we're so close to it. Sometimes it can be hard to really say, but yeah. I do have things that I really liked in these final episodes, so I do want to get into them specifically. So I think we should move into summaries if you're ready.
The 6th episode is called The Vigil. The trash can man arrives in New Vegas, where Flagg orders him to use his weapon sensing abilities to find a nuclear bomb, which Flagg plans to use against the Boulder group. Tom leaves Vegas to return home. One of Lloyd's men kills Judge Ferris, angering Flagg, who wanted to force her to reveal the last spy. He does figure it out, but too late. In Boulder, Mother Abigail has ventured into the woods to commune with God and atone for her sin of pride and to try and figure out God's plan. She is confronted by Flagg, who taunts and attacks her. Harold and Nadine rig Mother Abigail's house with explosives, planning to set it off during a committee meeting. Joe warns Larry of Nadine's duplicity just as he realizes that the batteries in his walkie-talkie have been removed and his motorcycle has been sabotaged. Frannie breaks into Harold's house and finds his surveillance room and explosives. Harold finds her and tries to trap her, but she manages to escape. Joe hears Mother Abigail's voice and finds her in the woods, where she is rescued. Harold and Nadine activate the explosives just as Frannie arrives to warn the committee. The blast kills Nick.
Okay, yeah, episode 6. This is, one of the most egregious parts when it comes to Trash Can Man, but I feel like we've talked about him pretty well. I don't want to hammer that point home any more than it needs to be. So let's focus on some of the other stuff, I guess. This kind of vision quest, walking in the woods conversation that takes place with Mother Abigail and Randall Flagg is pretty interesting. He says, "I am Legion," sort of. I think it's right out of the Bible. This is a famous quote. And then she says, "Get behind me," and like stuff like that. "Get behind me, Satan." And I think he says like, "That's not my name." So like, it's this, they're kind of playing, like toying with the idea of like, is he not Satan? Which they continue to do throughout.
Yeah. And they do it a lot more than I think even the book does. And I think they go as far as to basically out and out say that he's the Antichrist, that he is like something like
she says something, in a later episode about how he's his father's son.
Right.
So who's the father? Is it Satan? Yeah.
Yes. And a lot of the biblical stuff comes in heavily in the show, which I do think is another point where they're sort of hammering home what is meant to be sort of interpreted. Like there are clear moments where it's like, is Abigail like can you say for a fact that like the hand of God is actually the hand of God, or is it some other force in the universe that is the Christianity God? Or is it to be interpreted? But I think this show is leaning heavily on like, check out all this biblical stuff.
Yeah,
it's
the
Christianity.
Christian God. Yeah, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I will also say Tom Cullen and that performance, by comparison to Trash Can Man, is looking great.
Yeah,
it's looking much more nuanced and careful and considered. And honestly, Tom Cullen, I think works for the rest of the show. I thought he did a good job.
I do want to say like something that you had said kept sticking with me with Trash Can Man, and it's this idea that Trash Can Man is Gollum. And I kept seeing Ezra Miller's performance as like this like extreme version of a Gollum like creature.
Yeah. It's clearly what they tried to do. They tried to make him into a creature, but the problem is he's a human and we're not in a fantasy world really, so it's not going to work the same way.
Yeah. But I just kept having that idea in my mind, seeing him the entire time, and not that it made it better. That was just sort of, I could understand in a way that they wanted a creature when I think with the text, like knowing what the baggage of what had already been written, that's not a situation where you go creature. Like if it was an entirely created world and they wanted this person to be sort of, I don't know, a creature of sorts, like you'd
make him part demon or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
like overtly a creature. Yeah.
Like he's a creature before he comes in contact with Flagg. If Flagg somehow had a hand in doing something like that,
I don't know. I there's a lot that could be done to fix that character, but it would take a complete overhaul. If anything, you needed to smooth out some of the rougher edges from the adaptation, and they went the other direction. It seemed like, seems like to me. But yeah, so Bobby Terry, a character who I was not expecting to even get at all, or only very briefly. He does get a prominent scene here where he faces down Randall Flagg, who menaces him, and then he flips him off. Bobby Terry does, and then Bobby Terry goes and gets in the elevator, tries to escape, and then Flagg is in the elevator with him, and I guess kind of like eats him like a wolf. It seems like kind of attacks him like a wolf.
Tears his heart out or something at one point.
Yeah. This is probably the most prominent bit of violence that we see Randall Flagg perform, right? Until much later, at the very least. What did you think of this bit? And was it scary? Did it work for you?
I liked it up until the elevator. Like, I liked it up until he's in the elevator with him. I liked that moment. And then he's tearing him apart in the elevator. The fight scene was pretty... I just think it went a little far. Like, I didn't necessarily... I think the fact that he was menacing him and he's scared and he gets into the elevator and then he's in the elevator... And then you leave the rest implied, or just show. You don't need to show the fight through the, because I don't know, it didn't really work great.
It looked kind of silly, right?
Yeah, and I think you just like show him at the end covered in blood, and like he walks out, kind of thing. May have made that scene work a little better for me. Yeah. But I did like the confrontation in the room up until, and then the sort of chase that happens to the elevator.
Blows like the door off as he's walking in slow motion after him, and then the doors to the elevator close before he can quite get on, and then he appears in the elevator, which like, can Randall Flagg teleport? Maybe.
I was under the impression that he like turned into a dog, or turned into a wolf or something, and like wolfed his way in, and then was like, that's why he's like low to the ground or something. But
like he snuck in before it got closed. Yeah. So it's sort of heavily implied, if not outright stated in the book, that he can shapeshift. But we never really saw hard evidence of that. I
thought we I guess we didn't. I thought we did see him like transform, but like in his like alternate like desert studio world.
Stuff that's occurring in the dreams, I don't really count. I guess we saw flashes of what like maybe he really is, but that's different. I mean, like in the book, it seems like he transforms into a crow at one point.
So, we don't really get much of that.
Yeah,
that would have been expensive.
Probably would have been expensive. Would have been cool though. You know, there are other things you could have maybe skimped on if you were going with that route, but I don't know. It was pretty good. Something about Randall Flagg, though, really until the final episode, I continued to find him mostly underwhelming. Like there was something about it felt like he didn't quite demonstrate his power in the way that the book version does.
I kept thinking like it seemed like he was threatening, but it didn't seem like there was as much lurking under the surface as there was in the book.
All we see is him floating, basically, otherwise, right? Like he doesn't really do much else. So in the book, for those of you who haven't read it, he drives a man insane by staring at him. The guy starts like babbling and like completely loses his mind. So there's a certain sort of like unknowable, unfathomable darkness going on behind his eyes that is going to be incredibly difficult to get on screen, but I didn't get any of that in the show for the most part, and that was some of the stuff that I found most interesting about Randall Flagg. So I guess when I was hoping for more hints at like this bottomless well of darkness and stuff that's difficult to understand. Instead, we got a very animalistic attack. It honestly reminded me a lot of like the vampire, True Blood version of Alexander Skarsgård and what he's done in the past. So anyway,
I thought the same thing. But I mean, I didn't. Skarsgård wasn't my issue again with that. I think it was more content.
Otherwise he did a pretty good job, and in fact was good for the most part. I wish they had done more with him. Like I think the potential was there. But let's move on to Harold and Fran, because this was a pretty big change. Also, we get Nadine sabotaging Larry's motorcycle to keep him from going to the vigil. But the change of having Harold actually catch Fran in the act when she's down in the basement. And did you get the like sort of Shining reference I think we're getting here? Where she's reading the words and like if she's like turning the pages and freaking out, and then he comes.
There's actually a lot of this sort of larger Stephen King reference universe thing, and it's like cinematic references more than it's like
the Shining carpet is shown off prominently in Las Vegas. I think on a few different episodes, and like honestly, like it mostly works. It's a nice little nod to the fans of Stephen King and his films. I do kind of wish they would reference more than just The Shining over and over again, but for the most part, until episode 9, like that's mostly what we get.
That's what I was gonna say. Like at the end, they do drop like the mother load. They start dropping all the references.
Stephen King wrote the episode, so he found ways to get it in there. So Harold, as I was saying, he comes up behind Fran, and they have this face-to-face, this argument, and she kind of seems like she's going to convince him at one point that this isn't who he is. And they even embrace, and then he locks her in, and he even says like, this is for your own good or something like so. So what did you think of the change to have both Nadine and Harold decide not to kill two people that they care about? Because in the book that doesn't happen. The book is mostly all about those people.
Right. You know what I think it was? I think it was the placeholder for what happens in the book, which is we do get sort of the struggles of these characters. We get them struggling with their attachment to Flagg and doing the right thing, doing the wrong thing. And we get the internal thoughts of Harold when he's working on the body crew and he's got his friend and his friend's calling him Hawk. And we get a little bit of that in this show. But we get the sense that he is truly conflicted in the book, before the end where it's clear that he was conflicted when, his end. And then in the show, I think that was their way of being like, see, like there are moments of doubt and there are moments of them being good in some way. So I think that was what that represented. And I liked it. I like the changes, because it makes for something more interesting than because without that, Harold in the show would have suffered. I mean, he still wasn't exactly what I would have liked to have seen from the character, but without that like sense of conflict, he would have just been like this, this evil, vengeful kid who eventually just randomly dies. Yeah.
Yeah. I felt like it was a decent to good idea to have this confrontation the way it goes down, but it felt a little bit like a half measure. Harold targeting Fran and her baby, is so much more personal and true to life for people like this, I think. Like, the violence is almost always directed at the woman in this kind of situation, not like the other man that maybe she has interest in. So the idea that Harold would want to spare her, bit of a stretch. Usually in these situations, she's the prime target. And so, if you're going to have this situation play the way it does, I would have liked to see more of a physical, desperate confrontation in the basement that maybe even left Harold having to leave after Frannie got the upper hand in a way, and then maybe he's able to escape, but he's been injured in some way or something like that. Like, it would have given Frannie a moment to like, stand up to him and have agency and fight back. But the idea that he would just go, it's okay for you not to get killed. I'm going to kill the rest of them. It's fine. That felt a little bit like it went against the character that I knew, at least from the book, and also what they'd shown on the screen so far.
I can see that. Yeah. I mean, she, there is a change that I liked with Frannie that we'll get to in a later episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so then the bomb blows up, and yes. Nick, I did like putting it in the piano. It was a nice like the placement of the bomb had a purpose that it doesn't really have in the book. Like it's just kind of in our random cupboard or something, closet or something like that in the book. Doesn't really matter. Whereas here it was like a specific location we had been to and it referenced to Mother Abigail and all this stuff. So I liked that change. It looked pretty good.
Yeah, I still hold to the fact that like for myself, I just felt really I was so in shock with like what they didn't do with Nick that I was just like pretty. Maybe I should rewatch the scene or something, because I was just like,
well, no, and even if the scene is decent, the problem comes before that, right? Like the problem comes with the creation of a character that you care about, and how they failed to truly make us care about Nick in the way that Stephen King does in the book. Because by the time we get to that point in the book, we love Nick. And
exactly. I think I'm just a biased Nick fan, and I'm just like really upset about the fact that Nick was the character that gets screwed over in the show.
Yep.
But moving on to episode 7, The Walk. Following the explosion, Harold and Nadine leave Boulder on their motorcycles. Harold loses control on a curve and is badly injured. Nadine leaves him there to die, telling him it's for the best. Over the next few days, as he is dying, Harold writes his final thoughts in his journal before shooting himself in the mouth. Nadine meets Flagg in the desert, where she finally gives herself to him sexually, and Flagg reveals his true demonic form. From her hospital bed, Mother Abigail reveals God's will to Stu, Larry, Ray, and Glenn. They are to travel to New Vegas by foot, and that one will fall on the way there. She then dies peacefully. After saying their goodbyes, the four journey westward. They encounter Harold's remains, and Larry reads his journal before covering his body. While climbing out of a washed-out area, Stu falls and breaks his leg. Larry, Ray, and Glenn recognize Mother Abigail's prediction and go on without him. A short time later, Kojak the dog returns to stay with Stu. The other three eventually enter New Vegas, where they are arrested and taken to Flagg's hotel. They are greeted by Nadine, who sees herself as beautiful and glamorous, but in truth is emaciated and ghostly pale. She is also very pregnant.
So I thought episode 7 was an improvement over what happened in 6. I thought this were some of the more memorable scenes. I thought the four traversing the United States together was very reminiscent of the cinematic Lord of the Rings. Which is funny because King was referencing the Lord of the Rings books, but here it felt like they were strongly referencing the movies, right? With the way those camera shots were, and them walking around the ridges and stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
There's like these like Colorado mountainous ranges where it's clearly like sweeping drone shots nowadays, which were helicopter shots in the films. But yeah, awesome stuff. That stuff looked great, and I liked the sort of montage they had of them traveling. A lot of that stuff is good, but let's jump back to Harold and Nadine.
Yeah.
And
so
Harold's
in your summary, it says he loses control, but I think it's important to point out that a significant change is that Nadine causes the crash in the show. Now, it's implied that like she kind of knew it was going to happen in the book. I think Flagg had told her something to the effect of it, but she didn't cause it.
Yeah, there's like oil.
Here she like speeds up and then she slows down and she ends up getting him to crash, basically on purpose. And it makes her seem a lot more villainous in this moment, where at this point in the narrative in the book, it felt like she was sort of like sleepwalking towards Flagg. Like she didn't know that she actually wanted to follow through with it, but it was like, well, I'm hot committed now, there's nothing else I can do. Right. And here it felt a lot more like she was making active choices that were pretty dark. And then that leads to... So the sequence of him flipping over the railing I actually thought looked great. I was like, that was a good stunt. That clearly was a real person who took a tumble in some fashion. And I thought it looked good. But I thought there was a bizarre choice that undermines this entire episode, and is to have Harold impaled by a tree branch. And you might say, Luke, why do you care about this? This doesn't matter. But I contend that it does matter, because it is extremely important in the book that Harold breaks his leg viciously, and his broken leg is a death sentence. That he's left to die, it gets infected, it is really gnarly, and he ends up having to shoot himself because of the leg. And the leg alone. That's the only major injury that we hear about. We maybe hear about a couple other superficial ones, but that's the one. Having him impaled, like gruesomely, through the chest makes it very clear that this guy is not surviving no matter what. No matter if like an ambulance drove up, he'd probably be in trouble. Maybe, I don't know.
Well, and he survives for days, it seems like.
Yeah,
also.
And it's fine. You can have a lot of the same effect, but what you lose is the focus on the leg, which is very important for when Stu falls later. Because in the book, I pointed out that King is manipulating you into thinking that this is a death sentence for Stu. And maybe you still do in the show, but not as much as you would have if you'd just seen somebody else basically die from a leg injury.
Yeah, I thought the same thing when it was unnecessary, but they wanted it to be sort of cinematic and gruesome and blood spitting and stuff.
It's frustrating though, because it's so much more visceral and affecting to me to imagine having a gruesomely broken leg that's starting to infect, and that's what's going to kill you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, to know that this is survivable in the normal world.
Exactly.
That, like, if things are normal, but they're in the stand world where it's a dense, because, you know, everything's reverted to
there's no ambulance coming. So it is a death sentence, and I think that's very important. You know, whereas this seems like it might have been a death sentence regardless. So anyway, I won't harp on it too much, but I was just frustrated by that change. We do get a lot of similar beats with Harold, although it felt like he didn't quite arrive at the same place he does in the book, where he like truly takes ownership of what happened and sort of realizes that he created all these problems for himself. And he kind of has a moment where you again pity him and you recognize how much he's been manipulated into this position. Maybe you still you do still blame him, but like, I don't know, it felt like they were going for a bit of that in the show, but it didn't quite get to the same spot. Was that your read of it too?
I mean, I agree. He said the things that he was supposed to say, but did we really believe that it was like he really meant it in that moment? I guess so. Like he said, like
he seems sort of like sneering and stuff still towards the end. Like he still seems full of grievance in a way. Like that's where I think the performance didn't quite land, and that's why I was hesitant to give him the glowing grades all across, because I wanted to see a Harold that is more. Who is aware of what he's done to himself and has a moment of like self-reflection as he's left there. And I think that we do get that in the book, and we kind of got it in the show, but it felt like he was still very much the Harold that we know and expect when he ends up killing himself.
It just felt like he died and he was upset that he was dying and kind of regretted stuff. But agreed. Then we get Nadine and Flagg in the desert. Yep. Having sex / in his hotel room.
Always going to be a very difficult scene to put on screen, I think. We talked about how to me it's you know, one of the most troubling, upsetting, triggering scenes in the book, but also one of the scariest. And this version, you know, it comes kind of close, I guess. It's tough to say what I would have definitely done differently. The idea to have her sort of like imagine that she's in Las Vegas while actually being in the desert, and it all becomes part of this sort of illusion that he's cast on her. I guess it was fairly clever, but I was confused about like where she was, where he was, and can he teleport? Again, the question comes up.
Yeah.
I guess he can teleport, because he teleports from the side of the road to being in the back of Campion's car the very first episode. So I guess he can, but I don't know why he doesn't do it more.
I'm never clear on whether he's actually doing that or it's like a projection. Yeah, I'm never like fully clear, but yeah, agreed. It seems like he definitely can at least like project himself across distances. I don't know if he can impregnate people across distances.
Because that's the thing. Like he actually comes to her in the desert. It's very important in the book, whereas it felt like he was actually in Las Vegas to me, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, some sort of demon magic is going on. Yeah. I thought I didn't expect them to show a demon Flagg. What did you think of his sort of demon form?
I will give it a B- as far as like scary looking demon Flagg.
It was fair. Yeah, I would say it was pretty fair.
It could have been more.
It looks like a sort of a CG creature that somebody created.
Yeah, I'm not a demon maker. You know, I'm not somebody who's you know good at these sort of things. So like you know. I'm sure whoever made it did a good job and you know was held back by certain restrictions, but yeah, he just kind of looked like a modeled dark.
He looked like
thing.
You know what he looked like to me? Like a burnt, unwrapped mummy.
Yeah, definitely burnt. Yeah, I like that. No, anyway, that's Flagg, I guess. But so Nadine is like convinced she's all like made up and looking fine and like beautiful, and so this is a big change from the book where she is essentially driven mad and reduced to being almost catatonic, and immediately I think recognizes how big of a mistake she's made. Whereas here she's like kind of on board with it and thinks she looks different than she does, which, by the way, and my wife pointed this out, Corpse Bride is what she looks like at the end. It's like
She does.
it's just
good pull.
it's just makeup. She doesn't actually look that bad. Like you were saying, emaciated and whatever. Like she just looks like she's got Corpse Bride makeup on, like she's doing a Halloween costume. It actually looked kind of bad to me. But sure, that's what they went with.
I do want to, I guess, touch on Mother Abigail actually dying. I think the scene did what it was supposed to do. Nothing really stands out to me as super significant in terms of it being different from the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's she dies right away instead of, I think, sometime later. She doesn't heal Fran here.
Yeah.
But I think
which is a reference for later.
I think that gets saved for later. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
honestly, it might have been a good idea to do some sort of healing here just to set it up.
It was important in the book, right? Because it is sort of them recognizing the true power that she has and going, well, she just healed someone in front of us, so we better just completely give in to her. Or not give in. Commit to our faith and be willing to follow her instructions, as they end up doing. But it was fine, and again, it led to one of the better sequences in the entire back half of the show. They're traveling, which was fun, and I wish it had gone along a little longer. It's not a very long section in the book either, but I kind of wish there was a little more there.
That actually makes me think about thoughts that I had, and then I also saw people talking about it online. Like, if you flesh this out and allow us to spend more time, multiple seasons.
I think it should have at least been two seasons.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it easily could have been. I think the only thing that you possibly had restricting you was that you had this pretty star-studded cast that would be hard to get back for a season 2. But if you do it well, everybody will be excited to come back and it'll work out. But more time with these characters, more time to sort of live in the trauma. And especially, we talked about it, but the first half of this story in King's book and in the show is the most exciting part to me. I think it's the most, that's the premise being set up.
It's so important. Right.
Yeah, I think it's the most interesting thing for people to get on board with.
Well, and talk about character groundwork being laid. Like, that's by far the most important. Like, that's when you truly bond with all the main characters.
Yeah, and to go back to the book, people talk about Stephen King and his endings, and honestly, like, The Stand is the ending was the thing that I probably liked the least about The Stand, as the journey and the characters and everything that was set up before. I liked more. I still enjoyed the end, but I did feel like it felt like it had certain elements to it that I was like, oh man, like it didn't quite hit the payoff that I thought that it might.
Yeah.
But I still overall enjoyed the book, regardless of that. And I think that this show suffers from that a little bit. The fact that, like, the ending was a little bit less satisfying than I thought it would be in the book. So the material they were going off of was already set in that way, but then they just made some bizarre decisions to spend time.
What do they
with
call them?
Characters
Own goals, where you're scoring points for the other team. That's essentially what they're doing here at the end with some of this stuff. Las Vegas in general is a complete mess. I still just vehemently dislike the path they chose to go down with how they wanted to depict Las Vegas and what Randall Flagg's rule looks like. I thought it was a huge missed opportunity, which, like, okay, so they're pulling him into town here, and we see, like, there's at some point there's like children beating a man with like a hockey sticks and stuff as they're driving by. I don't know. It's such a
let's
weird...
jump to. It's bizarre. It went from being bizarre and kind of campy for me to, like you said, being just like entirely like wasteful of their time and effort of a lot of the story that was being told.
We're about to get a lot more Las Vegas in episode 8, so maybe we should wait for it there. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about them finding Larry and everyone finding Harold's remains, and then Stu breaking his leg.
Oh yeah. So Larry is the one instead of Stu that seems to have a final moment with Harold. And I was okay with that change because I felt like they did a good job selling how much Larry cared about him through the fact that he followed him across the country. The problem is we didn't see enough of him actually doing that. You know what I mean? Like, we saw it
like
here and there.
A couple scenes.
But, like, imagine if we had actually spent a bunch of episodes where we didn't know who Harold was, maybe, and we just saw Larry following his words or something like that. Instead it was a couple of flashback scenes interspersed with other stuff. So it just didn't land quite as well as it could have. But the idea there, I think, is good, and I think it works pretty well.
Yeah, I like giving the scene to Larry because when Stu did it in the novel, I remember thinking like, of course Stu would do that because he's gonna be the bigger man there and like do the. But like I didn't care that Stu didn't do it. You know, it didn't bother me. I was like, and then Larry stepping in, I was like, that's a moment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it gives Larry another moment to be important because I feel like
I will say leaving your jacket behind is probably a bad decision.
Yeah, especially in that climate and that region of the country.
Yeah. Cover them in something else. Maybe not your only leather jacket.
I totally agree. Yeah, it's like, wow, you're gonna regret that. But I understand the sentiment is there. Right? That's the leather jacket that we see the entire show that he's wearing, and like that's like, so it was a sacrifice made by Larry. But yeah, agreed. And then Stu falling, and I thought this whole sequence was very reminiscent of like the stairs in Mordor, like with Frodo and Sam and Gollum, and their like going up and going down situation.
I liked how they actually had the dog like bounding up and down, looking like pretty effortless. I was impressed. I was like, that was a good, stunt by that dog. They trained him well.
Dog.
Yeah, that dog was good. Kojak was great in the show. Maybe not quite as great as book Kojak, but that's because we don't get a Kojak point of view section.
imagine we get like, how there's like the Fly episode in Breaking Bad. Like there's these specific episodes in some shows that are like a complete departure. Imagine we get like an entire Stand episode. So that's like you're saying like departure of Kojak episode.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say a bottle episode of Stu and Kojak in the canyon. I mean, you could do it.
I would have been fine with that. Yeah, that's a fun, exciting idea.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't have enough episodes to do that. I would have if we had multiple seasons. I think that would be a great idea. But just a Kojak centric episode where we're literally like POV. Sometimes it's Kojak.
You saw Lost, right?
Yeah.
They used to always do like they'd pick a main character to like follow, maybe two, and then every now and then you'd get characters who would only appear for like that one episode. So yeah, like having a Kojak episode where you're just following Kojak the whole time. It's like, this is Kojak's episode.
And then like you said, he runs into some survivors out there surviving in the woods on their own, like to give us that other perspective, to peel back a layer of the onion kind of thing.
Yeah, well, they didn't do any of that, but it worked pretty well. Nadine meets them in the hotel, which is a change, and we can get into more of like the changes with her character because they do some more pretty significant ones.
Yeah, in this episode. So episode 8 is The Stand. Glenn, Ray, and Larry are put on trial in front of a large public gathering. Glenn mocks Flagg and the crowd's fear of him. Lloyd shoots and kills Glenn. Flagg appears, weakened by these actions. Ray and Larry are separated. Nadine visits Larry to try to get him to understand his situation. He shows Nadine her own reflection, the shock of which causes Nadine to go into labor. Realizing that she was never meant to live after giving birth, Nadine throws herself out of the window to her death, angering Flagg at the loss of his son. Larry and Ray are to be drowned in a swimming pool. Larry declares that he shall fear no evil. Slowly, some of the residents begin to join Larry in his chant, and Flagg begins to lose his grip on the crowd. Trashcan Man arrives with a nuclear bomb. A mysterious storm cloud, which the men identify as the Hand of God, forms above the hotel and emits bolts of lightning that kill everyone present, finally destroying Flagg. The lightning then detonates the nuclear bomb, obliterating all of New Vegas and everyone in it. Stu, from far away, witnesses the explosion as Tom finds Kojak and follows him. Back in Boulder, Joe feels Flagg's death, and they see the red glow of the explosion to the west. Frannie goes into labor.
A lot happens in this episode, but let's back all the way up to the beginning and sort of take it in chunks, right? Let's talk about the trial scene. So this scene was really over the top. There is a interesting sort of goth fetish aesthetic that they decided to go with for Vegas in general, but especially certain characters, one of which is the judge here, who we see as sort of the lead entertainment person. This, I think, gets to its most extreme when later on we're having the sort of delivery scene and there's like a complete goth fetish nurse there, and it's like, does she wear this all the time? Like,
she's got like a red cross on her as her lipstick.
And it's like, it's like, what is happening? Very odd. And again, I just don't like the way that it is like, see these people, they look weird, they're bad. Again, it just felt weird. And then backing that up, there's a few normies in the crowd, isn't there? They're starting to have doubts. There's an old man who looks pretty normal, and he's kind of like half-hearted in his chanting, and he looks like he's having some doubts. And oh, look at those old women that look fairly normal. They're not in fetish gear, because all the fetish gear people are completely bought in, because they're degenerates. And so, again, frustrating, and I kept laughing when they kept showing this one random guy having doubts in the crowd who just looked completely out of place. It was just very on the nose, like no subtlety at all.
Agreed. This is what I was talking about with like the scoff started to come. Mm-hmm. They started to roll in, and I couldn't stop them.
Roll in your eyes, right?
And I don't know. There's some fun being had by the cast. There's some fun being had in the production. I think like this court scene, I think, is a cool moment for Glenn. I think it kind of gets the same sort of thing done as the jail cell scene when he does egg Larry into killing him. I think it's maybe it's just that what's being said is supposed to make the audience get on board with what Glenn is saying is like the power, like these like he only has as much power as people give him. And in that way, so instead of it being more subtly implied that we pull from the scene, he's out and out saying like, guys, this power comes from your belief in him and your worship. Mm-hmm. And then it starts to break down.
Which is smart on Glenn's part. He's identified that reality, and so it feels like he is trying to make a public display of questioning Flagg because he either intuits or understands that is where he's drawing his power from, perhaps, and he wants to take that away. I think that all works. There's a couple other interesting changes here. Lloyd, who we've already talked about in the previous episode, he's a very different character in this version. But I felt like the changes they made to the character work best here when we see his sort of doubt and his fear and his reluctance to kill Glenn. That all works pretty well, and I buy it from the version of the character that we're seeing here. The thing that I was a little frustrated with, though, was Glenn doesn't get to say that shit to Randall Flagg's face, which I loved in the book. It felt like a really cool moment for Glenn to like stare down the Antichrist, if that's what he is, and say, you know what, you're not very impressive, fuck you. And in doing that, it kind of feels like it robs him of the power in the moment. Like he has to have Lloyd shoot him. Right in the book, he says, Lloyd, shoot this guy. Like he can't, it's like, does he not have the power to do it in that moment because he never had someone question him to his face like that?
It does. It's really interesting to me, like how sometimes he can shoot plasma balls through people's faces, and then other times he's like, kill that guy for me.
Yeah, which I assume is the lack of belief, right? Like it sort of de-powers him. He does like sort of stop levitating at the end of the scene. But I missed the like face to face that Glenn got in the book, which otherwise that's fine. I did think the whole show trial thing maybe went on a little bit long, was a little bit of too much of a farce. It plays into this whole mentality they had with Vegas all the time, where like everything was over the top. It was a complete, so one of the things that also really frustrated me about it, everybody gets shocked when Lloyd shoots a man in front of them. These are people who've been watching literal blood sport to the death frequently in their like fuck den right in the middle, and there's corpses being hauled out on chains and shit, and like they're gonna be shocked some guy gets shot? I didn't buy that at all, and the reason is because that's not the Las Vegas we know. That's a throwback to the book. So I don't know. Do you want to say anything else about this? Because I have a soapbox I want to get on again for a third or fourth time in this episode about Las Vegas. I've been building up to it. Are you ready?
No, I mean, I go for it. So I do want to talk about Nadine after this.
Okay, so it's a missed opportunity. Las Vegas in the book is repeatedly compared to Nazi Germany, or Germany under the Nazis, and how its order, its structure, and its sort of security that Flagg imparts and commands that people find appealing. They should have leaned into that for the show. We should have had a strongman, Randall Flagg, who is appealing to everyday people with power, with structure, with order, and with a sort of commitment to like look the other way at, the slavery, or look the other way at the brutality, look the other way at the crucifixions, because it's all in service to this greater security and, strength and everything else that I am giving you. Because that is something we see people still find intoxicating. And they could have actually said something really interesting about this time we live in, right? You could have had a show about a plague that deals with really specific, interesting political situations in this country right now. And it could have had everybody talking, right, about how Randall Flagg is a believable dictator, and that regular people, would find this appealing. The idea that is sitting there in their laps, waiting to be made, and a time in which it would have been perfect, and it would have been something that I think people would have found really interesting. And, maybe there would have been a backlash from some of the worst people on the internet, but, that can be good, right? It's people talking about your show. And instead it felt like, well, that sounds maybe touchy, or that sounds not as flashy and sexy as I want it to be. So instead I'm just going to go this 12-year-old fantasy about what I thought this would look like. This is the silliest version of Las Vegas that I can imagine. And instead they lean heavily into that.
Yeah, I think you're right. That idea of having someone radicalize everyday normal people, I think could have worked a lot better, especially in this time period. It's a good point to make. And what you're saying is basically what networks end up doing, right? This is CBS this is a premiere show for CBS. So as much as they're going to show some nudity and violence, they want it to be marketable to all demographics and stuff. You know what I mean? That's the sad truth about some of the network stuff.
Yeah, but I mean, if we've learned anything, I would like to think that we taking artistic risks, I think is so important, right? You can't just do the easiest thing and pull the simplest, broadest appealing thing all the time. Those aren't the shows that people remember. Those aren't the things that are getting nominated for awards. Those aren't the things that are generating, tons of discussion. It's just a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. I think studios are getting wiser to that. I hope, at least. Yeah. I think there's been a sort of movement in that direction, but there is also the status quo, unfortunately, of what it's been for a long time. And
that's just my, give us a writing credit on one of these shows, and maybe we can fix it up.
Yeah, right. We can come be consultants. So Nadine.
Yeah, let's talk about Nadine. So she has changed dramatically. She is sort of in the thrall of Flagg still, believes that she is going to be a queen, and she is sort of shaken out of that by Larry. And then, she goes into labor, and we have the scene where she says, I was never going to survive this. And it's essentially confirmed by Flagg. And then she kills herself. And this is a subtle, but I think important change from the book, right? She, in the book, hates Randall Flagg. She comes to hate him and resent him and to want an escape from the hell that her life is going to be. I don't think we get the implication that she knows she's going to die after childbirth. She just feels like she is in a living hell. And she realizes that she's made all these mistakes and she can't continue to follow through with his plan because she's giving him exactly what she wants. So she truly turns on Flagg in the book. Whereas here, this feels selfish. This feels almost petulant. If you're not going to let me be queen, then I'm just going to kill myself. And it sort of caps off what I thought was a missed direction, a missed character moment, and a character arc for Nadine, where she isn't as, sympathetic as she is in the book at times. So by the time we get here, I don't give a shit about Nadine. Fuck her. She's terrible. And I don't think I ever quite got to there in the book. I still felt bad for her.
in the book, she's much more of a character in service of Flagg, and I think it's still the case here. But they sort of did this move where they're like, let's give Nadine agency where she does something. They turned her more into a villain character, and she kills Harold, indirectly kills Harold, and then in this moment. There's the moment in the book where Flagg kills her, and it's sort of the theme of the story, right? like man creating its own destruction, and man, like that full circle sort of thing.
Well, and so rage.
Flagg kills her, which is sort of that full circle. He brings out his own destruction there, and in this situation, you're pulling that away from the sort of story circle that we have going on.
Well, because like it says something about evil and like how it is like inherently going to lose control or something, right? Like, there's something being said there that is all lost when you change it.
So I just felt like, again, themes within the book that sort of make sense for the overall story are being changed, maybe for the sake of changing them. And again, I think making Nadine a more complex character, maybe not even more complex, but more giving her the decision to kill herself is kind of giving a character agency more than having her killed by Flagg.
Yeah, but she completely manipulates Flagg into doing it, though. So it is still, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think she doesn't have agency in the book version.
Yeah, you're right. That's true.
I mean, I'm not saying that someone didn't think that, but I would disagree with them if they claim that, because I think both versions show some agency. It's just it's her relationship to Flagg and why she's doing it that I think is different there. But we're going to move into the final scene here, the bomb scene, the Hand of God scene. But first, we got to talk about Randall Flagg's dance moves. What'd you think?
Yeah. I mean, it got into the point of campiness to where I was just like fine with whatever happened, and I was like, just like show me how this is gonna end, because the second half of the show became tougher for me to watch. Like I was never like, oh, I want to shut this off. There were moments where I was like, all right, you're doing it, you're hitting the bullet points, let's go through the story. And like, I mean, moments of character like that, it's weird and it's like off the wall, but I'll take it over bland bullet point hitting, I guess. I'll take some dance moves every now and again, from unexpected dance moves. I was fine with it.
Yeah.
That wasn't the thing that bothered me in the scenes.
It felt like a remnant of this, where they were trying to have like a version of Flagg that like loves this fetish aesthetic and, this sort of like over the top, just zaniness. But it didn't always quite square with the version that we were seeing all the time. So when all of a sudden he burst into dance, it felt very out of the blue. It was a funny moment. I laughed, but I would have hoped that if you see the character dancing, it would have been like more frightening in a way. Like, I don't know, like what's his name, Mr. Blonde, like dancing in Reservoir Dogs before he chops the guy's ear off. Like, he's dancing, but it's fucking menacing. Right. And instead, this was just kind of a joke, which felt a little weird. Yeah,
I agree. So we're to the end here of this episode. Yeah,
the Hand of God.
So the Hand of God.
Hand of God. Well, I want to know. I feel like I've been talking a ton. So, like, tell me what you thought of this final scene.
I thought it was a weird choice to have the Hand of God start like ripping people apart with lightning bolts.
That essentially like bug zappered people,
vaporizing people.
Yeah.
Weird thing.
What did it remind me of? Oh, I remember it reminded me of War of the Worlds, the new version. People getting zapped out of their clothes into dust.
Yeah,
that's what it was reminiscent of.
Yeah, I can see that. It just was weird because, and like I get that they wanted it to be a bigger, longer action scene, like sort of epic moment, but I think the more epic moment would just be like, this starts happening, the bomb starts going off, everyone runs frightened, and then it goes off, and then we just like stay in shock for a little while. And I think like with the bomb going off in this version that we get, there's so much build up, so much crazy shit's going on. People are getting vaporized. There's like the sign like knocks Lloyd's head off in like a funny like sort of like seesaw moment. It like goes backwards,
kind of like a Final Destination or something, right?
Yeah. And for so like I would have, something that bothered me was like the bomb went off and then we immediately start cutting to Stu. We start cutting to Frannie and everybody seeing it. It's like, let the bomb go off and just like let us look at the devastation, let us think about it for a little bit as the audience.
Sit with what just happened, yeah.
Right. And like I think we got a lot more build up and a lot more people getting just like Final Destination deaths all over the place, like dying in crazy ways.
Yeah. So before it all goes down, we do see Larry and Ray handcuffed together in the pool as it's starting to fill, and then we see Lloyd refuse to execute them, I believe is what he says no to. He stands up to Flagg, and that enrages Flagg. So that is kind of similar to a moment that happens in the book, although it's not Lloyd who does it. I thought that worked pretty well. I also liked how Larry and Ray are... Now, I saw this elsewhere, so I won't take full credit for it, but they are essentially kneeling together with their hands handcuffed together in like a prayerful motion, and to where when they die, they're literally on their knees sort of praying together underwater, which is kind of insulating them from what's going on. It doesn't save them, but I don't know, maybe it's not quite as terrible. It's tough to say. One of the things I noticed, though, is that this ball of energy, which is like basically right out of the book, but its origin is different. It comes down out of the cloud, whereas in the book, it comes out of Flagg. He shoots it into this guy's face. So in this version, in the show, it would have been shooting it into Lloyd, because he's the one who stands up to him. If it was this, a similar situation, shoots it into Lloyd, gruesomely would have burned and destroyed his head, and then it rises up and starts to menace and maybe even kill some of the people who are having doubts about Flagg. And it seems like Flagg's power, and again, is a moment of like, holy fuck, Flagg is super powerful. What is this guy capable of? And then the hand of God basically comes down and slaps it. It's kind of my reading of it. It comes down and it's like deflection. It's going to slap that ball that you've summoned, Flagg, and put it back down onto the bomb. And so it deflects his own sort of evil power into the bomb, which goes off and is his final end. So it sounds like a minor thing, but like it's a little different than just God coming down and obliterating him, which is what happens here.
Well, it's also God coming down and obliterating other people, like just like zapping everybody all over the place. But yeah, I like what you said, because he again is that moment of Flagg created his own destruction again in a way, like whether. God's hand did force it in that way, but it's still his energy.
His energy turns back on him, right? Yeah. It's less of a like vengeful, like lightning bolt shooting God, and more of a God who is willing to use this energy against the creator of it.
He's like he's tipping the scales. Yeah, he's not really influencing that much, other than creating a giant cloud hand and slightly pushing an energy ball into a nuclear bomb.
I've said it a bunch, but missed opportunity to not have it look like a dog paw.
Yeah.
So that's a reference to our last episode, if you listen to that. So Trash Can, he brings this bomb, and in the show it seems to be like Flagg wanted him to get the bomb, but he was supposed to bring it to the airfield instead of to him, and so it was just like a mistake that Trash Can makes at the end. In the book, he kills some people, he sabotages some stuff in retribution over feeling like he's being bullied. Then he goes and he gets this bomb as an offering, as an attempt to ingratiate himself and show that he is a believer, and as a gift for Flagg. Flagg doesn't know it's coming, and then it arrives, and that's when he's like, oh, you fool, you brought this here. But like, that's more interesting to me, even though like both are, maybe not the greatest setups for a final thing, but like, this version, just, I don't know, it continued on the line of bad Trash Can Man decisions. And then, I don't know, man. I know we're in a show with lightning balls and God hands and stuff, but like, I don't think you could just like zap a warhead with lightning and it's just going to explode like that. Like, I don't know, but then again, I kind of do, and I don't think that that's how it works.
I genuinely don't know. I assumed that if you heated it up, it could blow up. I don't know. I don't know how these things work. I'm not a nuclear physicist.
Yeah. I won't say with confidence, but I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't work that way. Let's just say that.
Gotcha. Well, busted Stephen King.
Yeah, I got you, man.
Lightning won't set off a nuke.
Call me, I'm Adam Savage.
Busted myths.
Anyway, again, kind of thing I'm only going to quibble with because the show is not better. If it was better, I'm sure I wouldn't care.
Yeah. Speaking of which, let's go into the last episode, which I didn't care that much for.
Interesting. I thought this was one of the better ones we covered here at the end.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll give you my reasons why. But
okay.
Episode 9 is The Circle Closes.
Wait. Before you read the summary, this is just for everybody who maybe doesn't know, this is the episode that Stephen King wrote, and he has said in interviews that this is an ending that has been like rattling around in his head for like 40 years. And this is something that he's finally decided he was going to put out there. And so a lot of Stand fans were very excited and are very excited for this episode. Okay, go ahead.
Which you kind of just set me up for the stuff that I'm going to say in a little bit.
Yeah.
But, so episode 9, The Circle Closes. Frannie gives birth to a girl whom she names Abigail after Mother Abigail. The baby catches Captain Trips but recovers, and more babies are born who are also immune to the disease. Stu, Tom, and Kojak eventually return to Boulder. Several months later, Stu, Frannie, and Abigail leave Boulder to head back to Maine. Passing through Nebraska, they stay at an abandoned house in the midst of a cornfield, which is being watched over by a young girl. While Stu heads into a nearby town to get more supplies, Frannie is frightened by the spirit of Flagg. She falls down the well and is badly injured. Frannie awakens in a jungle where Flagg offers to heal her and return her to her daughter if she agrees to be his agent. She refuses and flees, but encounters Mother Abigail's spirit, who prophesies that she will become a mother to 5 children. Stu returns and, with the help of the little girl, who is implied to be a young Mother Abigail, rescues Frannie. The girl heals Frannie's injuries before disappearing. At last, Stu and Frannie arrive in Maine and ponder theirs and humanity's future. In some unidentified place, Flagg, taking a new appearance and a new name, appears before a primitive tribe and demands their worship.
So a lot of the same stuff from the end of the actual like expanded, unabridged, whatever version of the novel that we read, except for it has this extra section with Fran.
Right.
So before we get to the extra section, though, I want to back up to Boulder and talk about that, because I actually really liked this little monologue. It's not really a monologue because Franny's essentially talking to her unborn child, or I guess recently born child.
Which we get in the book as well.
We do.
She's like writing something.
The fact that we get it directly here, it feels like it leans into Stephen King's actual writing, because Stephen King's writing this episode. And I felt like it was one of the more affecting emotional moments that we've had in the entire show. I thought it worked really well, and I was immediately sort of impressed, and it felt fresh. It felt different than some of the writing we'd gotten elsewhere. It felt stronger. So in that sense, I liked the opening, and we do move into her decision to leave Boulder pretty quickly. And we aren't really shown any evidence for why she wants to, other than a brief scene where we see some of the like guardsmen sort of arming up, picking up guns, which is all we really get in the book too. But I would have liked to see some more evidence of like why she feels like she needs to leave Boulder. It still just seems like a bizarre decision to me, but I don't know. What did you think?
Yeah. All right, I'm going to talk about the good first. Mm-hmm. So I liked that the show made the decision to make Frannie the leader when everyone else left. So she became the sort of acting leader. They leaned into that. That's what the book needed, sort of, to give her something to do at the end, because we talked about in our and some of this other stuff that happens is nice as well. Just to give Frannie some closure, because it felt like she was a really important character that was sidelined for the third act, and then really didn't.
We
have
talked about it in our last episode that was something that we felt like she was lacking.
So I did like that, and I agree. The part that she's sort of the stuff that Stephen King wrote about, society rebuilding, all of this stuff, I liked. But a lot of this episode, that the things that started to bug me were the things that were left unsaid in the book that you're interpreting and understanding how things are going to go on. I can't tell you the number of times in this episode where they explained the stand and they said how
the words "the stand" happens like 3 or 4 times. Yeah.
And it's just like the out and out saying of these things was like, again, eye rolling to me. And I was like, you're leaving all the things that are like sort of left there to be interpreted and make you ponder and like mull it over in your mind. You're just like, they're telling it all to you in dialogue, which I wasn't a huge fan of. But then, they leave, and I'll let you react to that first if you want to start talking about passing into Nebraska and all that other stuff.
So they go to Nebraska, which is not really an important place in the show because that's not where Mother Abigail was. But I think she at one point maybe talks about growing up in Nebraska. So maybe you're supposed to understand that this is like where she used to live or something. Unclear. Having the girl in the cornfield, if it was corn or just tall grass or whatever it was, it was very unclear to me if that was supposed to be Mother Abigail or like someone else who was working on her behalf. But the longer it went on, the more I was like, okay, this has to be Mother Abigail, maybe as a child. Again, that raises the question: is this actually her house, or is she just showing up because she can like, create an apparition that it can, get in through the grass or something? I don't know. Kind of weird, but like overall, this felt like a little short story nestled into the ending here, and it felt like a deliberate attempt on King's part to give Fran a moment to shine, a moment to have a direct confrontation with Flagg, which is not given to her at all in the other part of the book. And also to throw in just a shitload of Stephen King references, because I felt like we had like just tons of them, and this felt so much like a Stephen King thing, like the well, the grass, the house, the turtle that we saw up on the shelf at one point. Like there's just so many references.
It felt like Stephen King going way up his own ass. Like he was like, "Let's go," and
okay, but that does sound like just being like it was also pretty fun. I don't know. Like
I'll say why I feel this way.
Okay.
This episode feels like chaos to someone who knows nothing about Stephen King's universe.
I agree.
If you don't,
this is for his fans. Yeah,
exactly. And I'm fine with that because I am a Stephen King fan. I like the guy, and I like a lot of things that he's written. And I like the reference stuff is fun for me. But this episode felt so much like he was just like treading. And the other thing, let's go back to what you talked about before I read the summary. This was like built up, and people kept talking about how this was going to be a new ending to The Stand, and it felt like I thought he was going to change pivotal things in the end to give us a new ending. Yeah. What he did was tack on an extra little section that was a fun adventure for Frannie, and like you said, the main reason for this scene is to have Frannie and Flagg go head to head, which I like and I'm fine with, and I think that was a fun decision. It did become extremely confusing when Abigail started to become involved, because you're like, okay, so this has got to be larger Stephen King universe stuff, because like, is she reincarnated? Is Abigail reincarnated? Mm-hmm. She's clearly not, though, because she just disappears at one point. Was she really there? I have to assume yes, because she was affecting things that were happening.
She was like in the car and stuff.
Yeah,
somebody was there, seems like.
So things were actually happening. So anyway, let's sort of take it chronologically. Stu leaves. He goes to get some supplies. Frannie is like on her own, and you think like I assumed that like people were gonna roll up, marauders or whatever. Like people were gonna roll up and sort of like, and that's not really what happens. She is like flagged into a well. He like comes up behind her.
Yeah, well, she also just like is going out on some creaky boards to try and get into this little spigot. And very questionable scene, but very like old school horror. Like I found it kind of endearing in a weird way, where it was very reminiscent of like just people making really dumb decisions in old horror movies. Because like you knew she was gonna fall into that well, like there was no doubt. And then I actually thought it was kind of fun how she like there was a cool camera shot where she reaches into the to the spigot to try and like clear it, and you see up from underneath it. I thought that was cool. And then she gets bit by a rat.
I'm sure they did that practically, by the way. I guarantee they did that practically. Some sort of like probe lens or something like that to like get into the pipe and shoot that. I assume.
Yeah, it looked cool. And then she gets bit by a rat, and it literally made me jump. So it was a nice little jump scare. You know, jump scares are inherently cheap, but again, there was sort of a campy like throwback feel to this whole scene. And I was feeling
it. So is this Corn? Is this like a Children of the Corn thing? Was like this associated in some way? Like...
He also has 1922. I think he has a story called like In the Tall Grass or something. I feel like tall fields and tall grass is a big thing in a lot of King's work. I haven't necessarily read all those stories myself, but I'm aware of them.
We do see some cornfields and stuff in Mother Abigail's visions, and we hear about it in the book a lot. Like that's talked about a lot with Abigail. Should we talk about the fact that she's called Mother A in this?
Yeah,
did that bother you at all?
A little bit. It just, I don't know.
Yeah.
It felt kind of like weird. I don't know.
Are they trying to like new school it? Like I like, are they trying to like add some, I don't know, make it different in some way? It just felt like a weird choice to me. I didn't really get it.
Yeah. Why?
Mother A. They're always screaming for Mother A.
Yeah, I don't know. It was a weird choice.
Yeah.
It didn't really roll off the tongue. So I'll agree with you there. But so then we get Flagg, and he's like in this tropical place, but he's also doing his like projection dream thing. And it's again weird where it's like, where is he actually? And I thought we were in like a dream world, but then we see this sort of tribe, and then I'm like, oh, okay, this is from the book. So I think it was, again, sort of they're playing with that, like, I don't know, locational thing. I guess Fran would be the one who was projecting at that point to another place, or she got pulled over there to talk with him. I thought this was actually some of Skarsgård's better stuff with Flagg. I
did like this. I thought that he was having a lot of fun.
You know what this felt like too? This felt like the character being written by the man who invented him. Because it felt more like Flagg than I think Flagg felt like Flagg in any other episode. Does that make sense? that sentence? Yeah. He felt more Flaggy here. And again, it felt like Skarsgård was having fun. And then like trying to kiss her, and then she bites his lip. You know, I thought that was an interesting little inversion.
The one thing that I did like, the you know, to pull back the biblical stuff, she's being tempted, right? He's like, be my vessel, or be my whatever agent, whatever this summary called it. And you know, everything will work out fine for you. And that's like the temptation that like the Antichrist or Satan like is associated with. So like I like this scene for the fact that they come face to face and there's that moment, but it just does feel like it was like an attacked on addition. Like it can't not feel like that to me.
And that's fair. So yeah, Mother Abigail shows up in the form of this little girl, and she saves the day, and then she heals Fran when Stu finally gets her out of the well. She's got these gruesome injuries, but then she heals her, and that was very reminiscent to me of the original scene that was omitted from the adaptation.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I guess it mostly worked, but again, it felt like they were just moving something instead of doing something new. So I guess I can see what you're saying there. It's like that scene already existed in the book. You've just moved it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess give credit to King if he wanted to sort of do the Tolkien thing, like, and just like have more endings. Yeah. Like he threw another one on there. And
it definitely felt kind of unnecessary, other than it gives Frannie a nice little move, or a nice little like extra bit of story where she gets to confront Flagg personally. I don't know. I still think this is one of the stronger episodes, if not the strongest. Maybe episode 7. It's between this and episode 7
in this half.
In this half that we've covered.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I would think. I mean, like more than anything, I was just like bugged by the fact that it felt unnecessary. But like overall, it was like
I felt like I was having more fun with it. I was enjoying it more, even though it wasn't perfect.
Yeah, I could. One thing I do want to say is when we jump to Maine, and something my girlfriend pointed out was it says like a week later, and then they decide to have the conversation about like what happened back there. Like,
yeah. So what actually happened? And,
like,
my wife said the same thing. She was like, they didn't talk about it at all.
What about the car ride? Like, you guys just like silent the whole way? Yeah,
it was kind of a weird thing. And yeah, I mean, it was fine. I think we get something about taking a stand again, gets said at the end, and I rolled my eyes so hard.
Too many times did they say the stand in this.
Yeah. Again, I think in a previous episode we talked about that, like Peter Griffin and Family Guy. There's like they do like a mini skit where he talks about how he reacts whenever they say the title of a movie in the movie. And it's just him like pointing and going, "Oh, they said it," and then, like that's the way I feel every time I hear it now. I just picture Peter Griffin getting all excited, and yeah, we get several of them in the same episode here. But yeah, I thought it was a mixed bag, honestly, this final episode. But the show just felt different with King at the helm. King, writing it. I thought there was some really tense moments, some true like I felt anxious for Fran and about what was creeping beyond the the grass. There was a moment where Kojak is like staring into the field and you can't see what he's looking at. Like genuinely creepy moments that I look at and go like, the guy who's writing this knows what he's doing when it comes to horror, right? And I never quite felt that, in some of these other episodes.
Well, it had been a little bit since we'd felt that, right? Like a lot of the terror had fallen from the show in episode 8 and 7 and some of these other ones. Like the only notable thing I can think of,
change with the Lincoln Tunnel that just felt like a poor shadow of the original scene. Yeah.
One of the only scenes of tension that I can even remember, and it was like sort of, I don't want to call it cheap, I guess, but it was the moment where Kojak goes and fights this wolf.
Yeah.
When Stu, like that was the only other moment that I can remember feeling like tension and like, no, don't let the dog die.
Yeah, I guess so. But I mean, it was still like, it was a sad imitation of what we got in the book, which like you can't, I mean, you would have had to do full CGI animals to like try and get an actual sort of like choreographed fight between a dog and a wolf, much less like 3 wolves, which is I think what it is in the book. But I mean, I liked the little nod to that scene because it was such a cool one in the book.
But not, and like there were moments throughout the show that were tense. That's not I don't mean that's the only one that was not this one in the entire show. I just mean like it had been a little while and it felt like the show had gone away from some of the stuff that we had come to expect in the book.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's it, man. We're here at the end of the show. We have to make our very first of the year decision for whether or not the show or the book was better. It was the book. I mean, I'm not going to belabor it, man. It was the book. I
mean, if you listen to these episodes all the way through, I don't think there's a ton to explain.
Yeah, it's the book.
We prefer the book.
It's not perfect. Both have problems, but the book.
Yeah, I've actually been able to. Last week, at the end of the episode, I like talked about The Stand, and I've been mulling it over a little more, and I still do really, really enjoy it. But I think thinking about the ending more has made me realize it just felt so. I don't know. It was bizarre, and I don't know if it's that I need to like reread some of it or like just keep mulling it over. But it was a bizarre end to a book, and yeah, I still enjoy it. I think it's still in my top. I think it's still in my top few Stephen King novels for sure, though. Just because, like I said, the characters, the journey, and the premise are so solid, so strong, and the journey is just like it's worth your time invested for those reasons.
We also have a poll up on our Patreon right now if you would like to vote on it. We are weighing a few different options, women authors that we want to get to. I think there's 4 options up on there. Do you remember what they all are? I know we got Gone Girl, we got
Hunger Games, we got Murder on the Orient Express,
and Little Women. That was the other one. So those are the 4, and if you would like to vote on that poll, it's a patron-only poll, but that will be our project, whichever one wins. I think it's up for another week or so. Definitely check it quick because it will close soon, and then we will have decided what our next project after Scott Pilgrim will be. So, this was fun. This was good coverage. I wish the show was better. I still think that this would have benefited from being 2 seasons. Instead, we got 1. And, it is what it is. If you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoyed all of our coverage, one of the best ways you can let us know is to give us a rating and review on whatever app you use, especially if you're on iTunes, by the way, Apple Podcasts. Those are that's sort of the gold standard of reviews, and it's been a while since we've gotten new ones, so I would love to see a few more pop up on there. That would be really cool. We're at 75-ish, and I would love to get close to 100. That would be awesome.
Yeah, and if you're looking for another way to support us, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/ink2film. We have a lot of great tiers on there. We just got new merch recently that's for select tiers, and we're really excited about that stuff, so check that out.
Bonus episodes monthly, which the other version of The Stand will almost certainly be one soon, if not this month. I don't know, we haven't decided yet, but it'll come soon. Also, if you'd like to connect with us more on social media, we are at Ink2Film on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We'd love to see you on there.
Thank you to Ross Bugden for the use of our intro and outro music.
All right, another Stephen King epic gigantic project in the books. We are quickly, slowly, I don't know, depends on how you look at it, becoming Stephen King experts here, I think, right?
What is it, 5, 6, 7 down, something like that, and 200 more to go.
55 more to go or some shit. Yeah, he's written a lot of books. But yeah, always fun. Looking forward to doing more Stephen King in the future, honestly. I'm sure we will get to more. But yeah, hopefully you guys stick with us for the rest of the season. We're just getting started. And until next time,
thanks for listening.